Welcome to our Enterprise Blockchain, the Path to Monetization workshop. My name is Guido Molinari, and I'm the managing partner at Prism Group. In today's workshop, we are going to be discussing with a number of industry leaders that are going to be joining us over the next 3 hours. I'm going to be kicking things off with a brief introduction about us, Prism Group, and presenting a couple of frameworks that we can use when thinking about some of the insights that the various speakers are going to be sharing with us this afternoon. And then I'm going to be leading the first set of fireside chats, where we're going to have joining us Mariana Gomez de la Villa from ING Bank, Demetrio Migliorati from Banca Mediolanum, Olaf Ransom from Finality International, and Riccardo Turbiani from Microsoft. After that, I'm going to be giving the floor to my colleague Rick Cataldo, who is going to be hosting a session with speakers joining us from Ireland and the US East Coast. We're going to be having with us Tiara McGowan from WeTrade, Shyam Nagarajan from IBM, Chen Zher from Ernst & Young, and Daniel Wilson from TradeLens, and Mark Treshock from IBM Pharmaceutical Utility Network. After that, I'm going to be coming back, and with me, there's going to be another set of speakers joining us from the US Midwest and the Rockies. Among them, there's going to be Adam Kaplan from Salesforce, Merrick Vass from United Healthcare, the Synaptic Health Alliance, and David Post from IBM, Trust Your Supplier. We're going to then take some key takeaways together with Kathy Barrera, our founding economist at Prism Group, and we're going to draw some conclusions together from today's workshop. So our next speaker is joining us from Milan, is Demetrio Migliorati. Demetrio is Innovation Manager and Head of Blockchain at Banca Mediolanum. Banca Mediolanum is a very special bank in Italy, founded in 1997. It has always led in innovation with never having had physical branches. So they worked out their, outreach through 4,300 financial consultants, and then leveraging the internet very early on. Demetrio today is going to talk to us about Spunta, which is a system-wide blockchain banking network that went live earlier this year in Italy after a couple of years in testing. And it is one of the most exciting system-wide deployment of blockchain globally. Welcome, Demetrio. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you to you for the invitation, Guido. It has been a pleasure to prepare this meeting.
Wonderful. So, Demetrio, we're talking about monetization today, and we have enterprise network that globally are thinking, how do I capture my entire target industry, right? So if I'm a bank, how do I get all the banks in my country to join my network? Because we know that all of these networks are very subject to network effect. So more members lead to more value for existing networks. And from our research, Spunta is to date the only network that has managed to capture the entire industry in its relevant country. Can you tell a little bit about Spunta, what you guys have done so far, and the sort of key metrics of success that you've been able to achieve to date?
Well, I think as you already discussed, the real point here is that we put at the very beginning the focus on the governance of the project. The governance in terms of who is working on the project, the mechanism of putting together people, the mindset that people has to have when participating to such a large project. And since the very beginning, in all the activities that we have had as a success here in Italy, you mentioned Spunta, but there are many other projects that are working very well with a large amount of participants. We always have had the regulators at the table from day one. And this, I think, is the key. It is completely different. If I see my colleagues that are working in other countries and trying to set up big projects, normally they design the system and then they go to the regulator to check if the system is fine. Well, we did the opposite way. We began with a strong connection, or with the regulator, or with the example with Punta is with the Italian Bankers Association. It is a tight connection to the regulator. But I have to say, it's not only a matter of being so cautious with the relationship with the regulator, but it's also, I mean, there is a little bit of luck. If I see the Spunta project, the Spunta was at the beginning pushed a lot from the project manager, the Chief Innovation Officer of the Italian Banking Association, Silvia Tanasio. She was really the fire under the Spunta team. And I have to mention also the infrastructure that we have. In Italy, all the banks are tied together with a private network. And this private network was normally based for moving transactions from one bank to the other. Well, another man that I want to mention that is the former Chief Innovation Officer of SIA. SIA is this private network, Nicolò Romani, had in mind the possibility of to create the same kind of network, but blockchain based. So all in a sudden we had a project simple on a certain point of view. I mean, the Spunta project from an application point of view is not that complicated. It's basically just reconciliation of reciprocal account between banks. But so it's easy enough to not be exceeding worrying about the fact that you can have problems during the time phase of the project. But the point is that if you combine the action of a good project manager, able to gather enthusiasm around the project, the availability of a new kind of infrastructure for all the banks all together, and this team that has been created, we use the metaphor of the hoplites. Now, the Macedonians, phalanges, the hoplites, they are working always together to protect the guy that you have on your side. So these elements, so tightly connected with the regulator, so governance of a high level, a very good team, and an infrastructure that has been built to support the entire system, the entire banking system. Those are the components that we were lucky enough to create this Spunta project. Spunta project now has already the 78% of the Italian banks working together. 78% on a market base of the Italian bank and working together and reconciliating the current account, the reciprocal account with the blockchain solution. But we had actually three phases, three waves of putting in production the entire banking sector. The first phase has already gone, so we have been part of this first phase. The second wave will arrive in a few days from now, and the third wave will arrive at the end of September. So by the end of September, the entire banking sector of the Italian banks will be online with one first application of this technology. I have to highlight that Spunta has been the chance to create the infrastructure. We normally say that we built the rails, and on those rails that are connecting all the banks, we have now one first train running, but many others are already possible. The easiest of course would be for Spunta, the same process but applied to cross-border banks. But there are many others arriving. One that I want to mention that I think it will be very interesting is around the fact that we can use the same infrastructure related to KYC, to share the KYC enrichment that we do usually as banking processes, and that could be extremely interesting.
And Demetrio, just that's fascinating. Can you give the audience a sense of the amount of transactions that have already been processed by the network, and also how were you able to capture the long tail of the other, the banks that represent 22% only of the market, but I imagine they're probably 80% in terms of numbers of the remaining banks.
Well, the point is that the Spunta process has been regulated since 1979 with an agreement between all the banks. So it's part actually of the compliance of the bank. You have to have a certain process in place that is based on a certain technology. The idea that Silvia had was to amend this agreement, and now we have an agreement that states that all the banks has to use that specific procedure to do that specific process. So it's mandatory. It's mandatory. It's an agreement between all the banks. So or you comply or you have some kind of problem somewhere.
So it's fully mandated to the long tail of banks. And how many transactions?
I mean, it's not automatic, of course. Yeah. Bank has to choose, but how can you say no to something that is somehow an agreement between the banks at the level of the Italian Banking Association? So that is one. The second is that the volumes we are at the moment working with are very are significant. We tested the system with 200 million transactions, and it's a reasonable amount of data to justify the fact that you have to attach this system to be compliant. You can't think to treat this kind of volumes in a different way when you have the system in place that is doing automatically all the matching.
So 200 million transactions today, that's very impressive. I mean, probably out of all networks that we've seen, that are most processed transaction to date, and again, having 100% of the banks in Italy by the end of the year on the live network. And I know we're almost out of time, but can you tell me a little bit, Demetrio, about new products? You mentioned that now you have the rails in place, and maybe there was not a positive ROI on putting the rails, but like, what are the exciting new products that you guys are going to deploy on this now existing blockchain network between all the banks?
Well, there are many ideas, of course. The first one that everybody was looking at is basically the custody. There are so many possibilities to do custody of data, custody of tokens, custody of crypto assets. The banks are very well known to be solid structures in which you can leave your money and your important things. So the custody itself could be one of the next steps. There are other possibilities. I already mentioned the fact that KYC processes, banks have a huge cost in maintaining KYC processes active, and the possibility to share this kind of information between the different players and so reduce the cost of the KYC and anti-money laundering processes will be extremely interesting. The fact that we now have in place a strong structure of sharing sharing registries of different kinds. So with the awareness of that the bank is basically a very well organized enterprise in managing registry of different kinds, this technology should help us to lower the cost of these processes and extend the possibility to offer our customers new products, for instance, or lowering the cost for some of the products, lowering the cost for some of the processes that the customer has, lowering the time that is spending during the onboarding phases. So there are many possibilities. And we are discussing it at different levels. Even in the European Union, the moment there are several projects around the possibility of using these enrichment of the data during the KYC process, sharing this information between the banks, even cross-border banks.
Thank you, Demetrio. I wish we had more time to discuss, but we're up. Thanks again for joining us, and thanks for sharing the work and success that you've had on Spunta. And I hope we can continue this discussion at a different time, and hopefully New York next year in person. Thanks again, Demetrio.
Thank you. Fully available for all the questions. You can find me on LinkedIn and everywhere.